All right, everybody. We are back with season 1, episode 2, What Can We Do and How, part B. And we're picking up from the last one. And thank you all for joining in. We have Josh, Uncle Josh on the line. Josh, good to see you.
Good to see you.
We have Uncle Leon, who's joining us this week. Good to see you.
Yes, brother, good to see you.
Thank you. We have Uncle Randall. Uncle Randy, how are you?
Pleased to be here.
Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us again. So we're going to skip the intro. So if anybody wants to know more about these two fine gentlemen joining Uncle Josh and I, you can watch part 1. We're going to pick up where we left off last week. I think we had some good conversation last week, and we need to pick up and keep going. And so the categories that we're going to cover to answer the 3 questions that I'll read in a second is politically, socially, economically, individually, and then spiritually. And those who aren't interested in that can drop off when we get to that point if they don't want to listen. But the 3 questions we got, number 1 was from Linda A. from Florida. How can friends and family who are white best support you and help bring real change to the issue? Question 2 is from Olivia S. from Illinois. How can women who are married to men of color or who are raising boys of color support them considering the current events of Ahmad Arbery and George Floyd and the couple since then, unfortunately? And then Scott B. from Colorado. Hey, Paul, what if, how can we help was the topic for your next free advice from your uncle. We'd love to hear all of you and your brother's thoughts, as I'm sure many others would. So those are our 3 questions, and we're covering those. And so I'm going to ask a favor of all of you, that as we answer these questions, if you have a spiritual bent, I want you to give a non-spiritual answer too, if it doesn't necessarily ring true, because again, not everybody is a believer that's watching, have different demographics that are here. So, but I think you guys have some great input that if you give something that's really more spiritual based, just take a pause and I'll ping you if you don't, to just kind of answer it from a non-spiritual perspective as well too. I think that there's value there potentially, for those who don't believe. So, so we're going to jump in, and I'm going to, from a political standpoint, I'm going to throw it out there because we left off. We got a lot of good input. We got some answers from both Josh and Leon, and Randy added, and Leon added educationally. Randy added educationally last week, which was great. Got a lot of good feedback on that from folks as well. But I want you guys to just kind of speak, on politically and educationally, what you can do. And I'll just give you one example. Scott B., I talked to him, and one of the instant message conversations that we had back and forth was, I encouraged him to consider out in his town in Colorado to start a police board that he could potentially sit on if one doesn't exist, or better yet, I feel like he's just a good guy and cares, run for mayor. Make some change that way. If you have the means and the wherewithal and can do that and have the motivation, run for mayor, make that impact from the top down. And he is a great businessman too. So, so I want to get you guys, I'm going to shut up and let you guys jump in on that piece as well.
Mm-hmm. And just make sure I heard you clearly. This is politically as well as education, did you say?
You can pick whichever one. I added educationally since we kind of talked about that last week as well. But those are the 5/6 categories. Right now I just asked politically. So, what can people do from your perspectives politically? And we talked about, Leon, just to summarize from last week, you said, by no means do I believe in having politicians stand up in my pulpit of the congregation that I'm leading and, give their wares out there. That's not what you're talking about, but you do think it's important for, people in your congregation to get out and vote. And Josh, you echoed, and then Randy talked about, the educational, impact that we could have and need to improve on too. So anyway, yeah, I'll throw that out there and let you guys kind of, talk about that a little bit. And then I want to lead you into another conversation and topic socially here, which I think will be interesting to hear your feedback. So go ahead and let's talk about that real quick.
The fact that you're smiling about it is
Setting
scary.
us up.
Me a little bit. I know my brother all too well. I'm just saying.
Listen, I told you guys you can unfriend me at any point in time. I've been calling the friend list anyway, so exactly. You won't be the first. I'll just tell you that. So
I think on the political side, I think of politics in the same way that I somewhat think of like how I do life with good friends. Good friends, I have some really good conversations with. We agree on a lot of stuff, but then there's some stuff that we don't agree on, and I'm going to hold them to the carpet on some of those things. I'm going to challenge them on some things, and they do the same for me. So I first would say like these like blindly holding and revering either political side has been really destructive, and I think that's been like part of my frustration in the last like 8 years of politics has been like, if I'm a Democrat, then Democrats are perfect. And if I'm a conservative or if I'm a Republican, then Republicans are perfect. And what I have struggled with most recently, or what I would encourage anyone listening to have the things that you value, have those, but still accurately like critique and challenge the things that you don't align with, because there's got to be something. I mean, like, I love my wife and I would die for her, but we don't agree on everything. Like so can that's got to be the case within your political party. And when people are like mute or lack the willingness to critique even those that they agree with, you start seeing parties, it just gets really problematic. So I think a good first step is critique from within the crew you're already in, and that can start raising a lot of awareness.
I think that's so good. I appreciate you saying
well
that.
Said.
Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
That's well said. He took the words right out of my mouth. Coming from not only, I explained before that I'm a white evangelical, not because I align politically with white evangelicals, but because my ancestors are from Europe and I believe Jesus died for my sins and I'm going to heaven. And that makes me a white evangelical. But if my fellow white evangelicals would separate themselves from the Republican Party, like, I'm not saying you should not vote Republican, but don't align it with your faith. Like, if you are a Christian, you vote this way on the same spectrum. So I think I've told you before, Paul, that my conservative white friends think I'm liberal. My black liberal friends think I'm conservative, because I'm in this tension gray area in the middle where I don't align with either party. And so my black friends are like, oh, the Democrats are like, well, what about these social issues that you disagree with? But as Leon said, you're not willing to question, and both sides I have this. So I love what you said about separating yourself from the political belief. And the other thing I was going to say is it's time also to listen, especially to my white friends who are out there. Instead of pointing fingers, maybe we can listen for a few minutes. And we've been sort of pointing our fingers and dictating for hundreds of years now. And maybe it's time to listen to other people's stories and let that inform our political beliefs. And so I find myself in a listening stance, and I'm just getting overwhelmed with the stories of people that I've never really bothered to listen to their stories before. But that will change you to empathize with other people who are different from yourself. So I guess I wanted to jump on Leon's talk there.
Randy, real quick before I throw it over to Josh, what both of you just mentioned is so dead on. And I think you lose credibility when you are just so in with everything, like Leon and you just stated so eloquently, right? When you can't, objectively say, I don't know about that, right? And have that conversation and dialogue. Not everything you say is right on either side. I think you lose credibility, with other people, right? And so, Randy, just real quick, one thing that happened in the last couple of weeks when I posted that I've posted several things, as Leon's pointed out. My brutally honest assessment of the Black experience, but I made a post and it was passionate, but I made a post saying something to the effect of, what does complying with the police get you? I don't know if you guys saw that or not. It gets you a knee on the neck and death. And I said, I can't in good conscience, just comply willy-nilly.
Not resist.
you know, without considering the circumstances seriously. And if I feel like I'm in danger, I reserve the right to not be handcuffed, and I'll take my chances. And that really irked a lot of people. I know it did, and I don't apologize for it, but I'm just sharing with you where I'm at with it, right? And again, I'm not looking for it. I'm not looking to, you know, fight cops or take their guns or shoot at them or, you know, not comply. Just I've never had to deal with that and don't anticipate it. However, I might find myself in a situation that's unfamiliar, and I don't know, you know, and I don't feel like something's going to go my way, and I might have to roll the dice. But your brother, Randy, made a post that I just thought was just beautiful, to your point about listening. And I so can't even tell you how much I appreciated how he poised it and what he said. We've been friends for a long time, since I've been in, you know, in high school, right? And he said, hey, you know, Paul, I couldn't reply and react to what you posted, and I know that it strikes a nerve with people how I posted that, right?
And he is conservative as anyone gets,
that's
and
right.
yet he demonstrated that he was listening at that moment. So I also appreciate that, and I told him that as well.
Yes, absolutely. And he, so just to summarize, he said, Paul, I struggled when you first posted that. And again, Randy, I think you guys have family members who are in law enforcement, right? So again, I appreciate that. I'm a former firefighter in Detroit, same union. I get it, right? I get the whole thing. My grandfather was a retired Detroit police officer, you know? So again, you're not speaking to somebody who doesn't have credibility from that standpoint either, right? But Mike's whole point was, I stopped, I waited a couple of weeks, I had further dialogue, further conversation. And I got to tell you, I understand, and I don't really understand, and I never can understand, but he just didn't respond to his gut reaction, right? And then took it a step further to have conversation with his other Black friends. Was shocked that I'd been minimum, and honestly, I started counting it up after I posted to Mike and said that I've been pulled over minimum of 30 times. You know, on the side of the road on 94, coming back from Chicago, hands on the car, watching all the cars drive by, watching just another Black guy getting patted down, assuming probably that I probably have drugs, right? Exactly. And it's humiliating, right? Minimum of 30 times. I got to tell you that it's probably pushing closer to 50 or 60 since I started counting back since I've been a teenager. But the fact that Mike went and, you know, stopped, paused before he responded to me just doubled my love for him. And my love was always great for him, you know? So anyway, I wanted to share that with you and everybody. And then I want to give Josh a chance to also, you know, talk after Randy, if you wanted to add anything more too, since it's your brother, your big brother.
I'm done.
Okay. Josh?
So from a spiritual point of view, let me just say this, that politics are not our savior. And I'll leave it there for the moment, because that's what you know, sometimes we think that political figures or policies will save us. And that is something we need to talk about in the spiritual aspect of it, because broken humans have, at their best, have broken good ideas. And so you struggle to fix things when each of us are broken. And whether you're spiritual or not, you believe this world's broken.
Yes.
I don't care who you are. You believe this world's jacked up. And so, and who jacked it up? We did. So this idea that jacked up people somehow are going to have the perfect idea is always kind of funny to me. With that said, though, I agree with both what Randy and Leon said. You know, it really bothers me when people are blindly following a party. And what I always talk to them about is, tell me what the policy is that you think will change something. I don't want to hear about your politics. Tell me about the policy, the actual kind of law you want to put in place and the details of it. So let's talk about policies and people. How does that affect people? Because the problem is over time, you know, our founding fathers created a system that was supposed to be by the people, for the people. And then people came up with policies, and it wasn't supposed to be this political animal it is today. So it's morphed into from people and policies to politics. And that is part of the problem right there, is that we are conditioned to play politics instead of consider people and then how do policies affect people? So that's one.
Man,
The other thing is let's just be honest. It's an intellectual laziness, and it's easy, to just choose a party and to not really means I don't really have to become educated about stuff.
That's good.
And then that's a problem too, because our founding fathers, again, the part of the reason why public school was important, or schooling was important to not the founding fathers, but those who came quickly after, was because they understood that our political system needed educated voters.
Right.
So this idea that you can work, that you can operate in a system that was made for you to do some work and to be educated and just be intellectually lazy, it doesn't even make sense, right? It's backwards. It's putting the wrong formula. So I always, if I have a person who always chooses one side, I challenge them. I'm like, it's intellectually lazy. And let's talk about some of these policies, because ultimately they start to see their laziness when they can't fully form the idea of the policy they're standing on and the details of it. So because there's, both sides have a whole lot of garbage, just a lot of issues, and
they're both bought and paid for. Both sides are bought and paid for.
And then once in a while, one side or the other will have some good policies. That's like, hey, let's talk about that. I think that will really affect people, in the correct way. So I think the other thing too is I keep going back to, education is what I keep going back to, right? Is really what I'm talking about. Policies and people. Talk about your policies means I got to be educated. Intellectual laziness, which does not operate well in a system made for us to be intellectually coherent and willing to work to get some information. But the other thing is I always want to know when somebody is so keen on just one side, I want to get down to find out if it's emotion or if it's education. And almost always, if you're willing to just pick a side all the time, it's an emotional thing. It's not a well thought out educational, like because anybody who does enough education realizes both sides have some issues. Both sides have some good things they stand on. And then they have some, or at least stances they say they believe, they really stand on them or not, is a whole nother thing. But, so my biggest thing is for me, when somebody wants to talk politics, if you are intellectually lazy, it stops the conversation, because it's going to be an emotional conversation, which all of us know our worst decisions are made out of emotion. So now we're not intellectually, it's not educational, and then they're unwilling to talk about people, because the whole idea is keeping people to the forefront. The whole idea is people. For me, when I was a teacher, I used to always tell other teachers, this is not about you and me. This is about kids. And don't get me wrong, I got treated, because of all the policies put in place, like garbage. And I really had a lot of issues with adults, period. I never had issues with the kids. It was always the adults, whether they were politics players, or even at times parents, or some of my coworkers. It was always rarely with kids. But the reason why I was good at teaching was because I always kept before me that this wasn't about me, it was about kids. And when we start talking about politics, we have to say, is this about people? So
that's good.
Yeah, that's like a general thing. I'm gonna make that even more hit home, because like I feel betrayed by Republicans and Democrats, just as a Black person in America. And when you said like it hits home with people, I thought back to what many people referred to was Bill Clinton was the first Black president. Said he was cool, played the saxophone, all this stuff. But this brother created the 3 strikes. Like this policy.
A lot of social damage.
Destroyed the hood, because now if I get 3 strikes of marijuana, I'm gone for like double digits.
Which is now very legal, and there's still people serving, by the way. I don't want to get into that. But
don't get us on this whole marijuana.
I know.
I would like to talk about that for a session too.
I would. So we'll bring that up on another show. But
don't invite me for that one.
Right. But I think my point is, like, when you're thinking about people, like, I sometimes question the motivation. Like, okay, who was the people that would benefit from that? it wasn't my community. Fathers weren't jack. You know what? I'm gonna stay on topic. All I say is it benefited those that created a private jail system, and
That's
the
right.
policies funneled people right to that system, and it did not
slavery.
have and it did not have, when
Legal
you're thinking
slavery,
about
that's right.
people, like Josh is saying, like it gets really real. And I know some of the listeners or watchers might be saying, well, Leon, what can we do about that? How can we, like, you can look past what the brochure says, and like Josh is saying, try to educate yourself, because even though I'm like a champion for Black people voting more often, in comparison to my white brothers and sisters, we don't vote at nearly the level that my white brothers and sisters do. So by and large, the policies that are sometimes destroying my people have been put in place by white people who I think may not even know what policies they're signing off on.
But there's a lot of redistricting and things too that we also, so there's prison, there's all the maladies in the Black community that, again, for me right now, and one of the posts I made a couple of weeks ago is, let's deal with the police killings right now. That's the first thing I want to see stopped, right? The assassination of unarmed Black people. And then let's start talking about voting. Let's start talking about Black on Black. Let's start talking about prison reform. Let's start talking about education. Let's start talking about all that. But right now, the first thing that we've got to stop is the assassinations of unarmed Black people. So I want to pause, and I want to move us on. And right, by the way, Randy, you got to take your bong down from the bookshelf before we move on.
I can't show it. Yeah. Well, there's more to say about this.
Yes.
I know you want to move on, but sometime let's talk about. Josh said the word people, and politics is about profit and power. And there are people who want to maintain their family or their culture's politics because they stay in power no matter what happens. Right. But there's also this drive for profit. I'm reading this book about how Christians have been complicit in racism for hundreds of years. And so missionaries would come to talk to slaves, and slave owners would say, no, if they become Christians, then we have to treat them like real people. And so the missionaries were like, okay, well, we'll make laws where if you're baptized, you still remain. And so they were like working together for free labor. Like it was so important to missionaries that they not upset these people who wanted the free labor, that they literally changed the gospel of Jesus. Oh, I'm getting religious, sorry. But that's about profit, and that's about power. And we're still dealing with that stuff today.
Randy, don't apologize, by the way, for where you stand and where you. That's not what I'm asking to do. I just want to make sure that we're covering it on even-handed on both sides, because not everybody is a believer, and that's okay. But I don't want you to apologize either for where you stand. Real quick before we move on, and again, you guys got to brace yourselves for what I'm going to say, because again, you might be a little bit uncomfortable with a lot of your white friends. So just giving you some heads up. But I had to have the conversation. So there's the talk, right? That if you're a parent of Black children, you have to have the talk, right? And I had it with my boys and my kids too, right? I just recently had to educate Isaiah because he was going out of the house and he was going down to one of the marches and the protests, right? Which super proud of both of my kids for, going and standing up and doing something active,
Cool.
But I said, you have to have your ID and your money, because I don't want you getting picked up for vagrancy, right? And that is such an old Jim Crow law, going back, Randy, and what you're saying, and Josh, about, but it's still on the books, right? Vagrancy. You don't have ID, you don't have money, you can go to jail or be ticketed these days for vagrancy, and we're still having those conversations. So anyway, all right. So we're going to move on to socially. And I'm gonna pose this, and it might make you feel uncomfortable. And Randy, you are not the voice of all white men. We get that. You're married to a wonderful Black woman. You have wonderful mixed biracial babies who I love. Love your whole family to death. However, you are who you are. So,
I admitted that right away.
Exactly. So Here's what I'm seeing in general on social media and with the movement for people who are asking these questions of what can we do and what can we do to help stop this, right? To stop the police brutality and the police violence. And what I'm seeing, probably 80 to 85 to 90% of people who are not of color in terms of their respondency. There's about maybe 5 to 10% of white men who are down with the cause and trying to do things, that I see. But 85 to 90, maybe even 95% of the people that are not people of color are white women. White women. And I'm proud of my white sisters for speaking up and seeing it. And I think that what happened with George Floyd resonated with them when he cried out for his mama. And I've seen those memes and those posts of when he cried out for his mama, he cried out for all of us, right? What I'm not seeing and what I'm still hearing is silence by white men, in large, and who are also at the helm of a lot of the injustice that's going on, right? Whether it be from the boardroom to the being the finger on the trigger as an officer, a law enforcement officer. So, I'm wondering when my white sisters are going to challenge their brothers, their fathers, their sons, their husbands who they're lying in bed with at night to say, what are you doing? I'm up here protesting. I see what's going on. And I don't want it to hear the obligatory, that's nice, honey, and I'm proud of you. Good for you. I want you to look them in the eye and challenge them to say, how are you going to come along beside me and make a difference where you work, where you live, those conversations that you hear, those things that are being said, how are you challenging that? Because they're getting woke. And I think it should start making them feel uncomfortable, with their ineptness in terms of response. And so anyway, I'm going to stop. I noticed that from a social standpoint. I want to hear from you three.
Can I start with that?
I told you it wasn't going to be comfortable.
First of all,
that's real.
Respondency, you made that word up. And so I applaud you for that.
I know. I could do that. I can do that. I'm on the fly.
I applaud you for that. I love.
I'm not the English major.
But I'm glad I just said the words power and profit, because white men have the most to lose if society changes, and we know it is changing. I was the one who said in 2015, when I got my master's degree in children's literature, I stood up there and did my critical thesis on how the world is changing, that in the year 2020, a majority of high school graduates would be non-white. And that was the first year. This is the first year, nobody knows because nobody graduated this year, but more non-white high school seniors graduated than white seniors. And so that is a frightening prospect to white men who control the media, the politics, the schools, all the stuff. So I'm just telling you that this is a complicated issue for white men, because when we let other people have things, it seems to us like we lose things. Like other people just have something to gain, and maybe they don't have a lot to lose. I'm just telling you that white men are terrified that we are going to lose our control. And we do need to, and you know me, that I'm willing to give up control. In fact, I probably need to take more leadership in my family or whatever. But white men are in this position where if they start letting other people have things, they're going to lose things. So I'm not justifying it. I'm just telling you that that's what they're terrified of, which is the whole Make America Great Again. That's code for we're losing the media, we're losing politics, we're losing education, we're losing families, we're losing churches. And so that's why there's such a resistance out there to this kind of change.
It's interesting to me because, one of my minors when I was in college was history. I love history. So I talk a lot about history. I'm talking about this, but we know historically no matter what color you are, if you have power, you're not giving it up easy.
Right.
It's as simple as that. We can go back into Egypt. We can go into the Bible and look at historically the Egyptian people were not giving up their power easily, and they were not white folks. And they were very oppressive. And so we understand that whoever has that power, it is a very hard thing to let go of it, because it's almost like it's an addiction. There's almost an addiction to it. There's this high you get by having power.
But it's a control thing too, man. I mean, it takes strength to let others lead and to promote other people and push. Go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
That is very true. But what I am saying is that this is not shaking me, because historically anybody who has power doesn't give it up easily. It just doesn't, so now we're fast forwarding to here, and white men have the power in a lot of places in the world, if we're honest, and not just in America. Because of the trade, the slave trade, and all the other trade that was happening in the 15th and 16th, century, 14th. So, bottom line is that I'm not shocked by that. What I'm more shocked by, what I'm more hurt by, is when you say that you follow Jesus. See, the issue for me is that if you don't follow Jesus, you're telling me that your moral code is that you get what you can get rich or die trying. That is your belief system. And while I don't agree with that belief system, at least you're living out your belief system.
Josh, I want you to hold that topic, because I got another one. I want you to save that for the spirit, if you don't mind. I don't want to cut you off, but I want you to save that, because I'm going to hit you in the eye, between the eyes, when we get to the spiritual segment too. But I think that where you go, is that okay?
I know you're gonna, you want to give us spiritual brothers, a hard time. I know. Even last time you were like, look, I love you, but last time you said, I'm just saying, last time he was like, I'm on the payroll, and I was like, I love my brother. The connotation is that I'm going to do what I need to make money and not follow Jesus. But that's okay, player. I love you anyway.
He got you figured out. He told on you.
Listen. I love my brother because he does call me out like that. That's why I need a good balance on there. And he doesn't take it personal when I say that. I know it was a little bit of a, to you guys. But I know you guys can take it too, right? I mean, and again, when I say that, I really don't necessarily mean that to you guys, because my statement is true. And I'll get to that and when we get to the spiritual section, or piece of it too, in terms of, I'm going to make a statement and it's not going to sit well, not with you guys necessarily, but with a lot of people, because my statement of being on the payroll causes you to kind of guard your words and where you stand on things a little bit. So that's why I want you to pause for a second, Josh, if you don't mind, because
not go spiritual. Okay. But I do agree that, white men are in power, and it's easier for a white woman to eventually get it, because we live in a patriarchal system that has been, since the beginning of time. They have been oppressed. And so they understand oppression, they understand subjugation, and they understand making 58 cents on the dollar, or now it's like 77 cents on the dollar. They understand this now. They may not have understood the totality of how race plays into it, but once they're able to see it clearly,
connecting the dots,
they connect to their life and say, I understand this.
Right. And it relates to them.
Yeah. Leon,
that's good. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I don't know how this is gonna come across. So first, I think you could ask most men that lead anything socially with other men, whether that's community groups, whether that's church groups, and you'll find that most men just aren't like deep, vulnerable, and willing to share. That's just like not men, period, kind of. And breaking through those layers is something that takes time. And so I hope this doesn't, piss anyone off too much, but like, I just feel like white men don't yet fully care. Like if you, like when you care, you're not willing to simply say, I'm not racist. When you care, you're willing to say, I'm anti-racist. And if I see racism on my watch, I'm even willing to put myself in harm's way because I believe that it's that wrong, And while I think that a lot, and so what I think happened was women saw what happened to George Floyd and was like, whoa, this enrages me. I can't simply see a man cry out like this and it not move me to say, what if that was my baby? Even white women.
Yes.
And this is for the majority, even though I don't know the majority of white men, there are some that 5 to 10% has been loud, and those brothers, I commend for those 5 to 10% white men,
right
that have been going for it. Keep it at it. But for the majority of white men, I think the silence is connected to like a lack of true empathy, and I'm not sure how we break through to that empathy side of a person who the world is created around for their benefit. Like,
as evidenced by Chauvin, whose knee was on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The look in his eye when he looked into the camera and made the statement,
and they're talking to him,
and he makes the callous statement of, that's what you get when you're on drugs, and you know, just kept looking into the camera while he's suffocating him out. You don't need more police training. I'm sorry, that's just human compassion and empathy, like you're talking about. And I just, and it comes from lack of, part of it is just because you're not empathetic as a human being, number one. I'm sorry, but I can't give you a pass on that. But the other part of it too is that when we don't have community with people who don't look like us, sound like us, act like us, or do everything like us, it is much harder for you to keep your knee on the neck of somebody who looks like your neighbor, who you go to work with, or who you have genuine intimate relationship with. You'd at least have to think, wow, you know what? I have to go look Leon in the eye. And I have to, you know, and I think that's part of the problem as well. So anyway.
And I do think, like, I think right now, this has been a beautiful time in history, because like it's been a long time since a white person received a lot of flack for connecting so closely with Black people. And so even those friends of mine that are super conservative, if they speak out just a bit in their own communities, they're starting to get challenged, all types of rebuke. And they're like, dang, Leon, is this what you experience often?
Yes.
Like, I didn't even say I'm trying to be a Democrat. I didn't even say, let's go. All I said was, man, why didn't the other cops step in? Boom, 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 boom. And
you hate cops, you're against police.
Right.
Yeah.
And
well,
so
Leon,
no, I'm just saying, I do think that some white men are taking those steps of being vulnerable and being willing to be vocal. It's a smaller amount. But I said that just to champion those that are doing it. If people are asking, what can we do? Be willing to how do I say, be misunderstood, or be willing to have people critique you because you are wanting to say something that like disrupts the very core of your being. It doesn't mean you're going to be the president of Black Lives Matter tomorrow to say this man's life should not have been murdered, and this happens too often. Like, just speak up in your area. And if you're getting challenged and people start putting words in your mouth of things that you didn't say, intent that you didn't have, I think that'll create more empathy for Black people and allow you to begin to draw a bit closer.
And what you're saying, Leon, is it has to cost. I don't care what anybody says. If you're not willing to pay for something, it's really not that valuable to you. I was at a seminary class called Mosaic, and we were talking about white privilege in the white church, and then through history, sort of, from your to, you know, America. And we didn't even deal with black folks in general. We dealt with Japanese internment camps and Native Americans, some of the slaughter sites, massacre sites of Native Americans. Anyway, I got into this conversation as one of the only black people on the trip with a lady who basically said, you know, this just seems like the next new thing for white people to do. And so, you know, how do you know it's just not the next fad? And I said, well, what is it costing you? Because if it's costing you nothing, it's just a fad for you. So I said, you know, earlier when I said one of the things you should do is start having relationships with African Americans, and you told me that it would be a 2.5 hour trek, and that's a long ride, I realized right then this might just be a fad for you.
That's right.
Because it was going to cost you something. And so anything worth having, anything that we absolutely think is of value or is morally right or whatever, you know, should have a price tag on it. Should cost each one of us something, right?
That's good.
So,
yeah.
Well, and I keep talking about micro change in the human heart, and I think I'm perceived as, well, you don't want to do anything about systemic racism. People who are changed in their heart through relationships go do macro changes in systemic racism. A friend of mine, you know, again, shameless podcast. We're starting this podcast, The White People's Guide to Insensitive Speech, to help white people in cross-racial relationships. Why do we even need something like that?
Right.
But
Come on.
you know, you met Mel, Paul.
Yep.
We're going to do this podcast. They invited us to do a Wednesday night Facebook live stream about our friendship. And we talked for 45 minutes about our friendship. And of course, this started with you, right? When I moved to the city, you know, you guys, and these are the first black people I knew when I'm.
Am I your first black friend, by the way?
No, I wouldn't call it friend, but you know, you were, you know, student. No, but
associate.
They spent 45 minutes talking about Mel and my friendship like it was this earth-shattering thing. I was like, why do you want to talk about, we drink coffee once every couple of weeks, once a month at the coffee shop. Why is that so radical? But people were like, oh, that's so good, how to have cross-racial relations. I'm like, I don't know. I guess I've been doing this for a long time. It just makes sense to me that you would surround yourself with people with a different experience than you, so that you don't walk around repeating what everybody who looks like you says. But I guess it's.
So here's, I want to piggyback on what you just said, right? So I may have the claim of being your first black friend, but not your only black friend, right? Clearly you've expanded your horizons with who you married, even, right? You picked a wonder, or she picked you and had mercy on you. Wonderful. Like that's right. And so here's what I'm also struggling with a little bit, right? I'm seeing, talking about cherry picking, right? I'm seeing a lot of conservative people who, you know, have a particular slant, who are cherry picking certain young lady or certain conservative, you know, African-American news commentator, and that's all they're posting. You know,
come on, Josh.
I thought he was going to go for it. I thought he was going to say the name, but good.
No, I can't.
Nope. We don't even want to send people that way. No,
I can't do it. But here's the problem that I have, and I just had to have a conversation with a lady who sought me out to friend me, right? We have mutual friends of the family. I'm not going to say any names. But I'm her only, from what I saw, I'm her only black friend that she friended. And I accepted. I had to, but then she started posting all these certain folks and their sayings that fit her political stance. And they certainly do not represent all of the black community experience, nor does Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson either, right? So you can't go and cherry pick. But I saw all of these posts about animal rights. You posted all of this stuff. I went through her whole timeline. Animal rights this and adopt this dog. And I'm all about, that's great too, right? I am not a proponent of animal abuse. And if you can adopt them out, great. But what that tells me is that if you have not posted one thing about these incidents, whether it be, you know, George Floyd, Ahmad Arbery, whoever, and then you want to post the other, you know, cherry pick the other guys, you're telling me what it tells me is that you care more about these animals and these dogs than you do me as a black person. Yep. And so, you know, and again, these are people that, you know, are professing to have faith as well, right? And so I'm struggling with it, you know, but I had to piggyback on what you were saying, Randy, in terms of I'm your only black friend, and you're gonna try and post these things to me, and I just, you know.
So
anyway, I'll be quiet. Go ahead.
Let me say something about that. I'm gonna say something that probably is gonna offend some people, but
oh no!
Even
join me.
Oh no!
Even slave masters who considered their slaves 3/5 a person, they would literally at tax time put us with the cattle. We were in, when they were doing their taxes, we were found to be next to the cows or the sheep, because we were seen as animals. So I know this is gonna, for somebody to say animals' lives matter, you know, and not even talk about Black Lives Matters. Let me say this to you, that even the slave owners cared more about their slaves than some white folks do today, because it was to their benefit. It was to keep you healthy. Even though they considered you an animal, it was to their benefit to keep you healthy and going, because they could at least profit off you. They at least saw that your life was as valuable as an animal and not less valuable.
Well, I just saw your friend count drop by half, Josh. You came over to the dark side.
That's real.
But it's just the truth.
Drop the mic on that one.
It's just the truth. Just history tells you that.
Yeah. All right. That's good. Very good. Josh, real quick, economically, I'm going to make a statement because I want to get to a couple of things. So economically, I'm just going to say it, and I want you guys, if you want to add a couple of, you know, things. I want to be respectful of your time, but I also want us to kind of close this segment out with part B here. But here's the deal. Economically, hire more people of color, give them opportunities. I'm going to share this story with you in terms of what it's like to be in corporate America as a black person. When I get opportunities, two things. I feel like I have to hit a home run every time. As soon as I step in there, I can't make any mistakes. I can't, and I feel like there's you know, some leniency given to white people. Well, he's just learning. We got to train him more. I got to hit a home run. And number two, I got to hit a home run, not just for myself to keep my job and to get other opportunity, but I've got to do it for the next 10 black people behind me.
Yes, sir.
And
pressure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just telling you what it is. That it is a lot of pressure, but again, when I strive to be, you know, twice as excellent as everybody else, it's because I feel the pressure myself, and I feel it for, you know, the people of color coming behind me, you know, and that includes women as well, right? I mean, I feel like I'm an advocate, you know, in the workplace for people of color and for women. And so, you know, again, it's one of those things where you gotta hire, you gotta take more chances. And then you've got to mentor and help and carry their card all the way through, have those sidebar conversations that you may not be comfortable having, but pull them aside and say, here's how I might have handled this differently, right? And be with them all the way to the end like you would somebody that you feel more comfortable with. So I'll leave it there. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to, you know, have you guys make a couple of comments if you'd like.
So let me say this. One of the people that I like to watch, and he's not a believer and doesn't really matter because he's super knowledgeable about, and he's a white guy, Tim Weiss. Tim Weiss talks a lot about racial stuff. And I say he's not a believer because sometimes he curses and does some stuff. So if you're going to listen to him, but he's deep, man. He's deep. And one of the things he said, I always watch his stuff because he goes around the country. And he's well known by like Al Sharpton and stuff and respected. And he talks about race stuff all the time. And he talks about it from his white male privilege. And he said something about a year ago, one of the things that blew me away. And I'm not here to speak about whether I'm for Trump or against Trump. I'm just really trumpeting what he said. He said it became very clear to him about white privilege because now that, you know, Trump had been in for a little while, because nobody, if Trump does something crazy, nobody says, see, look, this is just how white folks act. But everybody, if Obama did something they didn't think was right, like, see, that's black folks. And he said it's so stark to see it. Like nobody looks at Trump or any other white president that was in Clinton or Reagan or any of them and say, see, this is what white folks are like. But you
couldn't even wear a tan suit.
Yeah, everybody was like, Obama was carrying the weight of the whole Black culture. And so I just thought it was deep. He said some other stuff that if you're a Trump person, you might not want to watch, because he said some really, inflammatory stuff. But I like him because he's a white brother who really is as woke as I've seen a white guy, and really uses his white privilege in a way to bring awareness to it.
Let's just talk about like the reality of economics. It keeps coming back to Josh. You talked about people, right? So you got two guys, they go through journeyman school, they come out as electricians, they're ready to rock. If that white guy goes out to the suburb, has no contacts, and starts his business, starts showing up at people's door, and he gives, hey, this is my quote, white people don't question it. Boop. That's the quote. It is what it is. Black guy goes out into the suburb, does the same thing, gives him the quote. Well, how about, you do it for maybe 500 less? Like I know like there's two assumptions that oftentimes happen when you look at a Black person. One, you question their quality, and then two, you question their price. And then you wonder, why is the guy showing up in a beat up truck? That's because he keeps undermining his own price just to be able to get business. Now, the sad part is I've had to detox myself from that as a Black man. Like, cause it even happens in the city when a white person comes, gives their bid, and a Black person comes and gives their bid, and now you start trying to talk them down. Like they don't talk down these Pella window industry guys and all these brands that come and try to so what is my point? My point is that the economics still have an impact racially. And what can a person do now? Right now, you can begin to support Black businesses, Black people, and give them opportunities. I'm not asking for an extra opportunity. I'm asking for the same opportunity that you give other white people in spaces. And I mean, I'm okay with even saying, and have some preference towards the Black guy, because he's probably starting 10 steps back. He probably didn't have a dad that was a plumber and passed down all of the tools to his son and been training his son since day one to go. And so knowing that this person probably starts a few steps back, consider how you economically use your funds. And if all of your funds only happen to go towards white businesses, white service people, white contractor, white, you have the potential of being a part of the problem.
I like what you all have said. And Paul, mentorship is important. I even find that, and I keep going back to my trade, which is teaching writing in college. I'll have students come in who are African American, and I know that I'm going to have to, for some of them, work a little harder, because it's like what you said, Josh, last week. They're not bilingual yet. They don't have what you call the King's English, what we call standard American English. But that whole standard, is a whole problematic thing. But they're not bad students, and it's not that they're not smart. They haven't learned standard American English. And so it's going to take me a little bit more time to mentor them into becoming bilingual so that they can succeed in four-year school. I work at a junior college, so I'm the bridge between high school and four-year school. But they're really quick to pick it up once you tell them there's nothing wrong with the way you talk, and there's nothing wrong with anything about you, except we're going to have to work on you learning this academic language so that you can, write for these professors. And I wish there were more people who would see, people with African American names. Are you going to hire Mary or, Jaquazine? Like,
Come on.
You know what I'm saying? Like, the natural tendency is Mary. And Jaquazine is just as smart and talented, but maybe she doesn't have the background that the other person has. So there might be a little bit more mentoring going on, but that's important
opportunity and the opportunity to fail
bringing
and make
people
mistakes too.
into the important part, which is the making money. You know, you talk about, oh, you know, you already pigeonhole Black people as wanting to take government. Well, let's hire let's take a chance on people with names that you can, you know, I don't know. This is a big thing for me. You got to be willing to hire.
This idea of handouts too bothers me, just because historically there's been 3 major handouts in our history. 2 of them were land, and then when you get to the GI Bill, and 2 of them are wrapped around whether you serviced the army. So after the Reconstruction, there was this handout of land, and then that was taken back. They gave it to the Black people who fought for the Union and down south, and then took it back and gave it back to these slave owners. So there was this giving away of land that Black people couldn't take into account. That was the second time land was given out. And then we talk about this GI Bill that we can even go back into the 60s, that Black folks who fought did not have a right. So when we always talk about this handout stuff and just giving a handout, it bothers me too, because our system
GI Bill, all those white soldiers got all those loans.
Education. So, you know, when we start talking about handouts, nobody's asking for a handout, number one, but if you want to talk about handouts, let's do so and talk about the 3 major handouts given and how they were given to white folks. And 2 of them were land and 1 of them was education. And we know that those are the 2 things that allow you to amass wealth.
Yep.
That's good.
All right. Good. Beautiful. Gentlemen, so I want to, if you can hang in there with me real briefly, because I'm going to drop the bomb on you here. All right. But I want to talk about individually, and I want to address Olivia's question about what can women who are married to men of color or raising boys, you know, of color support, you know, them in these current events. And I'm going to tell you something, that if you're a white person a white woman who happens to be married to, you know, a man of color, or have children that are men of color, or boys and women too, I'm just going to tell you, number one, if you're a woman of color, you need to protect yourself and stay alive too, because they're taking you down just almost as much as they're taking, you know, Black men down. Not quite to the extent, but, you know, Sandra Blanchard, I mean, there's so many people just recently that we can point out that are women as well. So number one, you need to take the same precautions that I feel like we're taking. And number 2, I think you need to just, you know, have the talk with them, and then keep doing what you've always been doing, which is listening, empathizing, loving, supporting. You've always been the champion of Black men, of Black boys, and all I can say is thank you and keep it up. And so individually, just kind of give me 3 things. Let's handle it this way. I'm going to go around the queue, starting with Randy. Give me 3 things individually that you can do as a woman of color, or just individually, period. Just give me 3 things that you can rapid fire off. Randy.
You'll have to come back to me. Let me think for a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, make sure I'm understanding. You said this is for a woman of color married to a white man?
No, who's married to you know, a Black man, or you know, brown, you know, man, a person of color, or has children of you know, as a person of color. And then I want to just ask the individual question, right? What can people do, right? So you don't have to take it from that perspective. I want to just hear a couple of items, you know, of what people can do individually. So there's kind of a twofold question.
First of all, you need to celebrate color itself. You know, don't fall into the trap of the lighter is better or anything like that. Just celebrate Blackness, and don't, you know, we joke in our family. I say, I got the darkest spot, right? I mean, just, it's a way of playing a game that color is beautiful, and you need to have confidence that you can go out there and do what anyone else can do. You know, the murder of George Floyd threw off the talk. You know, do you submit or do you fight back? All bets are off. So people just need to have confidence and approach the world like they're as competent as anyone else.
All right. I'm going to go. So here's what we'll do. We're going to go to Josh, and then I'm going to circle back around so it gives everybody time to think of things. Okay, Josh, give me something that people can do, whether you're married to somebody of color or just an individual.
Something you can do. My biggest thing is education. I think a lot of Black folks, we need to be better educated too. So if I'm thinking we need to be better educated, I absolutely believe white folks, I heard one of my pastor, a friend of mine from Life Church Canton, and he does all the work between racial reconciliation kind of in his church. And he said one of the things he always says to a white person, they say, I don't know what to do. And he says, so what do you do when your washing machine is broke down and you don't know what to do? And they're like, well, I get on Google and I research. He's like, you do some work. You educate yourself. So you do know what to do.
Yes.
And I'm like, wow, that was, you hitting people in the mouth, Daniel. But it's true. It's like any other scenario that you don't know what to do, you educate yourself to figure out what to do, even if that's getting 3 bids to have somebody come fix it. So, that I get that you don't know what to do, but what you can't say is, there's a lot of scenarios where you don't know what to do. Start educating. Start getting in some books, getting into watching some of this stuff. So
it's good. There's so many out there too for people to choose from these days. It doesn't take much. Leon, give me something.
I'd probably say I've been blown away by this. Target, I think, came out with a statement. All types of big businesses are coming out saying we are against racism. It will not happen within our corporate culture. All these different things. And I'm like, whoa, to Josh's point, we'll see if this is a fad and something just cool to do, or if this will be lived out. And I think though that people should be challenged in the same way. Okay, first, are you speaking up about racial injustice in your home? Great, first starting place. Second, are you doing it socially? Are your friends like, man, I don't make crazy jokes about, race because I know how he would respond or she would respond? Or are you the silent person in the group? Then third, in your work environment, you can go to work tomorrow and say, hey, Target made a statement, or Walmart. I'm getting all these big businesses confused. It's cool that I'm confused because there's so many of them. But you can go to your work environment and say, hey, what are we doing? What's our stance here? And see what people say. If people say, we don't care, or nothing, or we're considering doing something, would you help us draft up what our state? Like, you have a voice. You are in these different spheres. We're not asking you to solve all of systemic racism. Take a step in solving it where you are.
Just do it. Yeah. All right. So Randy and Josh, Leon's on top of it. He gave me 3. Boom, 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 man. I tell you what, I love it. He's on it. So Randy and Josh, I want to give you guys one more from each of you. Randy, you got anything else you want to add before I?
No, it's the same. Celebrate color. And when you have the talk, you can't just give one option anymore. You have to train your kids to look at the situation and respond accordingly.
Yeah, that's good. Josh?
Yeah, I think they are all said it, and it leads back to what Randy said, is these micro. I always look at it as dominoes. You can say you're just one domino, but when you abuse dominoes and you set them up as something that falls and you don't really play dominoes, we know that all it takes is one domino falling for the whole scenario to start playing out. Let me say this about I don't when we talk about cost and giving up stuff, I don't believe Roger Goodell is doing everything he could, nor do I think NASCAR. But what you cannot tell me is if Roger Goodell and NFL are willing to start making moves, and NASCAR, what excuse do you have?
I know. Did you see what they did
there's
today,
just no
too?
more excuses.
Oh, what did they do today?
So Bubba Wallace had that, somebody put a noose in his stall at the, you heard about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so he's the only black driver on the main circuit, right? And, they're investigating to find out who, did it, number one. And God, you know what? And I'm just going to say this, but we've seen the stories too much. I just pray that it wasn't him. I don't think it was, but you know the blowback that would just cause, right? Well, I'm just saying, right? But it went through my mind, just like, Lord, and I don't, I'm giving my man the benefit of the doubt, but I mean, we've seen it too many times, so I'm just going to throw it out there, and you can kill me on it. I don't care.
Nope.
But they all got together. Thank you. They all got together, all the NASCAR drivers, and again, they have all their sponsors. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, though. They're doing more than a lot of people, right? Mm-hmm. They pushed his car to the starting line and came up and all gave him the hugs and everything too.
No.
Yeah. So they're doing it. And so anyway, Josh, I think go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, there's no excuse when you start to see some of the whitest entities, and not that football, as far as the players are white, but let's be real, owners and coaches, but when I never thought I'd see Roger make any kind of moves, nor ever in my lifetime did I think NASCAR would say no more. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do. I literally thought I was dreaming. I'm like, this can't possibly be true.
They might be paying a cost for it, but I respect that though. Like you said,
I watched them today though. I'm gonna tell you what, because I literally watched because I'm like, I need to start supporting this. If they're going to make moves my way.
Yeah. And that is a social decision as well as an economic decision.
It's just smart economics.
And it's actionable though too, right? It's actionable. That's something else that all right. So speaking of actionable, all right. So you guys buckled in. So I'm gonna say we're moving. So by the way, we're getting ready to move into having some of our spiritual believer dirty laundry being aired, right? I know. And that's okay.
If you're not a believer, you want to stay, because my brother will make it. He'll make it. He's gonna throw some dynamite sticks. I can already see him lighting them. Just stay. You'll enjoy this.
I have a torch already pre-lit that I just gotta light. So all right,
calling you out.
That's why I love him. He's got to keep me honest. So here's the deal. There's 2 points that I'm gonna make. And I'm throwing the dynamites into the pond and watch the fish all rise to the top. That's exactly what I'm doing. So the last, since George Floyd, I've seen all these churches and church leaders, a lot of them white, right, have these well-polished, well-produced, we stand against racism, and, the next 4 weeks we're doing these sermon series on, race, and this shouldn't be going on, and that's great. You're saying something that should have been said every Sunday if it needed to be since I've been born, and even longer than that, back since we've been slaves. So, but okay, so you're starting. That's great. I'm not going to poke in the eye for that, right? And so, again, all these heartfelt, waxing eloquent, and then they have the one black person in their congregation or on their staff with them, and I had one pastor who I saw his video. He had the one guy come in. They were doing the back and forth dialogue about where they stand, and then they had the 6 white guys standing behind them in a V-shaped angle, and show. Okay, great, and that's good. I'm not gonna poke in the eye for doing that. That's not what I'm doing. However, what I'm starting to hear and see from a lot of these same folks is, okay, we need to just cool it down a little bit now and pray more, read the Bible more, and be more spiritual, which I don't disagree with, right? Those are all good things. If you're a believer, you should be doing that daily too, right? And if you just starting that too, then I'm not going to poke in the eye for that either. However, I'm struggling with people getting tired after 4 weeks. Okay, and here's the other reason that I'm saying it is because if you're that white pastor at that larger church, you guys are both smaller, congregations, and you start speaking out firmly on this and ingraining it into your church community, Josh, you hit it. It's going to cost you. You're going to get people who are going to say, nope, not down with that. And I'm going to take my tithes and my offering and my family and my volunteerism to another church who's not going to talk about that, right? Yep. And so that's the one point that I'm going to make. I really, I'll trade you your 4 weeks for, one of my weeks. For every 4 that you have, let's see how that pans out for you. But so that's the one thing, right? So it's going to cost you and your congregations. How committed are you? And I'm talking to you, Leon and Josh, because you guys have relationships with other white pastors at those other large churches. They don't care about me. They're not going to listen to me, right? I don't have a voice. I'm just another complaining black guy that, you know, they want me to just pray more and basically shut up and dribble spiritually, right? Is how I'm taking it. So, you know, I said it. Yeah, yes, I said it. So, and I'm not LeBron James spiritually either. So,
but he can dribble well. Just so you know, he is a good dribbler. I'm just saying.
I can't dunk anymore, but I had a little bit of game. So here's the second thing, guys, that I'm going to leave, and I'm going to shut up and actually let you guys do some dribbling. If you want to get so in business, you guys know what an RCA is?
Nope.
It's a root cause analysis, right? When there's something that goes wrong, you basically, you know, pull the team or hire some outside consultants or whatever it is, but hopefully you can get it done internally and you get to the root cause of what's going on, right? If I can't log into my website, you know, that may not be the root cause of me having, you know, the wrong password. You know, the server may be down on the back end. You have to go through and work out all the scenarios to get to the root cause and deal with that. And so in terms of the police brutality, I'm saying you got to stop killing us. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you don't like these protests, if you don't like what's going on, then stop freaking killing us. Unarmed. That's the root cause right now. I'm telling you. Sure. And again, you can go down to the sin hole thing too as well. I'm not disagreeing with that. But right now, killing us. And then here's the other thing too. If you can't aim for a leg versus lethally, then hire better shooters, right? I'm sorry, but you know, I don't want to hear, and I don't want to hear about your training and all this other garbage and bull crap. But here's where I'm getting to, and this is where I'm poking in the eye for the church. And this goes to not just white, this goes to white and black, Josh and Leon, you guys too. If you have law enforcement in your congregations, and you guys as designated leaders, church pastors, or church father, whatever you designate yourself, if you're not taking a stand, and if you're not leaning into these law enforcement, you know, and politicians, these law enforcement, you know, officers and politicians that are in your congregation to hold them accountable, you're not counting the cost. And then they've got to, if they're going to sit here and profess the faith, they've got to also hold their counterparts accountable, right? Yeah. Bottom line, that's going to deal directly and firsthand with the root cause analysis, which might help you, by the way, with solving your issues in terms of why the people like me who's a dun and doesn't go to church, right, and chooses not to fellowship in this current model, right, or the millennials who are also questioning, hey, man, when are you going to get involved? I mean, I see you talking a good game, but you're not actually doing anything. I'm not about that either, right, because there's no actionable things taking place. So I said it. Don't apologize for it. You know I love you. You can unfriend me if you want to, but I'm going to be quiet and let you boys go.
So what do we say? I think the first thing, so when I was on this mosaic about almost 2 years ago in the seminary class, this week-long seminary class where we spent 8 to like 6, maybe 7, 8 a.m. to 6 or 7 p.m. we were together in these vans and going to all these. And I had this guy who just would say incendiary stuff. And I kept asking myself, I got home every day and me and God had conversation. We had long conversation because I'll be honest with you, I wanted to punch him. I'm not gonna lie to you. I know look, I always am having to
saying a lot to get Josh to want to punch somebody too.
Yeah, I just am not but if you could hear some of the stuff he would say stuff on purpose. And I thought, why are you on this trip? And then he tried to check me because we were talking to this Native American guy who said, and people asked him questions, and he said, you're not ready to hear the answers for that. So we get back on the bus, this van, and this guy was like, he's just placating. You know, he's just, and so I said, no person of color ever gives you the full story. So he said, so all week long, you've been placating. You've been lying. And this was just one of many conversations. The day before, he tried to tell one of the black girls in my van that she had no right to be angry, and then wanted to give her some scripture, so I had to check him on it. So that kind of stuff is what I'm talking about. So anyway, one of the things, so me and him did get into it. I'm not gonna lie to you. And one of my biggest struggles as a pastor is to always remind myself that I'm God's child before I'm Black. And that's a very hard thing to do because this world reminds me on a constant that I'm a Black man. But I am his child first, and I need to respond out of that. And that's a hard thing to stay centered in. Especially in these kinds of moments. And I told him later, he said, what were you really thinking when I was checking the girl and you told me that I had no right since you were only giving me 70% of it? And everybody in the van who was a white person was like, we really want to hear the truth. And I'm like, y'all don't even know.
Y'all don't want to know the truth.
So then the Black girl, Ariel, was like, don't do it. It was like slow motion. Do not do it. But they just kept on like, no, no, no. So I said, you know what I was thinking the other day when you tried to tell Ariel? I was like, who is this white guy? And should I punch him in the throat? Now, I'm not proud that it's my sinful nature. I'm not excited about that. I'm just saying that I was operating out of my sinful nature first when I was thinking through that and processing it. Well, everybody who was white stepped back, like maybe this Black guy's violent. But one of the things I always say, I learned from there. And so me and him eventually had some good conversations, such as, he's like, I don't know how to go back to the last day we had a great conversation. I don't know how I go back to my congregation in Oklahoma. His church is in Oklahoma, actually, which is interesting. And I talked to all these white folks and I said, let me say this to you. You act like it doesn't cause Black pastors anything when this stuff goes down. First of all, I have to process this in my sinful nature and then stop and say, God, help me. And then there's no way I can't talk about it. And here's the kicker. I have to help my African-American congregants get past to some extent themselves and see Jesus.
Not punch
you know how sometimes infuriating that is to so the last time I spoke when we had something go down was the Charlottesville stuff, and I was preaching that week. And so and I had all these
and can you reference the Charlottesville stuff for those that might not know what that was?
Protest over a Confederate statue, and then you had quite a few white supremacists show up and we're doing all sorts of crazy cussing, carrying guns, shooting off guns, but not.
Ran them over.
Well, eventually ran a car into the protesters.
Yeah, ran a car into protesters, killed one of them. So now listen, I want to say this.
And then Trump said that there were bad people on both sides.
There were good people.
There were some good people.
Good people on both sides.
Right.
Yeah.
So now check this out. This is what I told him. I said, listen to me, man. So I'm processing through this. I'm angry. I hear what Trump's saying, but I'm angry. God is trying to bring me back and say, you do know you're my child first. And eventually my conversation with God was basically, where do you think I was in that protest? And I was like, sure enough, you were with the people who were protesting against the Confederate flag. This is what I felt like. Now, again, subjective to a certain extent, what God said to me. You don't think I was sitting next to the white supremacists that the four people beat the mess out of, beat them bloody after he swung on them. They swung on them and they got beat down. And he's like, do you think I was sitting next to him? Do you think I think he was sacred? That is the conversation. That is exactly what I told my congregants. And believe me, at least 20 of them wanted to have a very intense conversation with me afterwards because they weren't feeling it. And so this idea that it's going to be uncomfortable as a white pastor is ridiculous, because it's harder. It really is a harder message to say, I know you've been hurt. I know the wounds of 400 years, but Jesus. That's a harder message to get people to wrap their mind around.
Come on. What did he say? What was his response?
He said, I never thought about that. And I said, so just understand, you're going to go tell white people they need to start really dealing with this and get over their privilege. I have to look somebody in the eye who has been wounded constantly and say, but Jesus.
Come on.
So,
wow. Thank you, Josh. Randy, Leon.
Leon, you go ahead.
And Leon, I want one of you two to talk about leaning into the officers too, because that's a hard conversation and a hard thing to do. I want you guys to talk about that too, but go ahead, Leon. I want you to go.
See, so I've had that conversation with a number of officers. I don't have any in my church, but I have some that I'm friends with, and because I do stuff in the community, whether it's working out at the Y or just different stuff, I see them and I get a chance to connect. And
Gotcha.
if I can be honest, like the reason why white privilege exists, like Black police officers can do stupid stuff. All right. Like Black police officers at times have their issues. But Black police officers, when they take off their police uniform and get their keys and drive and go to a place that's outside of their jurisdiction, or if they have white counterparts that pull them over, they are scared, fearful, intimidated, and worry about their lives too until others know that they're on the force.
Yep.
So the conversation with Black officers that work and live in the city is sometimes more like, how do we help train up the next generation of white officers that don't understand the culture? Because volume does not communicate anger in Black people. But if you are a white person and you don't realize that, you think my volume is something you got to respond to and go crazy. And we just talked about basketball.
We're just talking. Listen, we're just passionate. We're talking, but they're getting loud and I'm uncomfortable. Yeah.
And now you going for your gun, and it's like, hey,
right, right.
And so, that does not mean that we don't need to critique officers of all kinds. Does not mean Black officers get off. I'm just saying, typically with racial matters, the Black officers are like, I get it. And even when they hear things from the pulpit, oftentimes like Black officers get like sometimes celebrated because honestly, they like defuse a lot of stuff that could go really bad. Like they are. So all that to say, I have a lot of relationships with officers, and I see them doing work that is counter to police brutality issues. Now, are there issues of theft, shaking down drug dealers, like all types? Are there other issues? Yes. And even just to be for real, and even sometimes beating up a person, like they might, yes, but like people dying constantly because of brutality that is excessive in their care, it just doesn't happen too often by Black cops.
It does not, and that's not where I'm going. But here's where the cost is, and here's where I'm going to push back and still push on you guys a little bit, and every one of your peers, right?
Yeah.
There's this blue brotherhood that runs, same thing we talked about with America versus the cross too, right? And there's this pedestal that the flag gets put above a lot of times. Josh, you talked about that, but you have to start taking a stance, and if that means that you get together with a group of other officers, white and Black, and start calling out the known police officers who are, continuously engaged in police brutality. If you don't blow the whistle, you are culpable too. And that's where I'm going. You've got to stop it on that level. And what that means is it might cost you your job.
It is going to mean that.
That's exactly right. And it might cost you your life if you take that stand, but you cannot sit here and tell me that you believe in the same coming king that I serve and you're okay with that. I got to still have that cheddar coming. Right? You can't do that. And you need to go work as an actuary if you don't want that kind of, involvement with the job you're doing. You're just taking a paycheck at that point. And that's what I'm getting at you guys with, because they've got to be the one. You got to hold yourselves accountable first and foremost. And I've seen more police officers speaking out this time versus many times, but it's got to be deeper than that and go longer than that. They've got to get together, and bond together and say, we got to do something. We got to hold our peers accountable, and that's costly. Same thing with these pastors, that it might be costly if they start keeping up with the racism talk and chatting about that, continuously, and then ingraining it in their, church communities, it might cost them. But I'm just telling you, you got to have that conversation. So I'll be quiet again.
Yeah. I agree. I think that the call to justice and the call for like internal integrity is a high standard, and it's one that is costly, and it's one that I just and maybe this is just me personally, but I just don't see the Black church having compromised on that challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't either. But so let me say this too. So when we start talking about this, like, they need to live into their faith, it is the problem of the church to live into their faith too. So yes, we're talking about, we're being specific right now. So please come up.
Yeah.
Right. Because if they're people of faith, they should be living out, following Jesus in a way. And I have about 5 officers, and I have a personal relationship with each one of them. 2 I actually go eat with. One of the guys got moved because he does stand up. So, he got moved.
That's great.
And we have 2 politicians at our church, and we have conversations with them. In fact, the one politician's son who wants to run for some stuff, I've had some very interesting conversations with him. So I'm not opposed to doing that. And I'm not, to me, my job is, whether I get paid to do ministry or not, I'm going to do it because that's what God called me to do. So I'm never, ever thinking through, how are you?
And I knew that's how you would react and what you would be. Yes.
Or how are you going to feel about me? That is just not how but I have had those conversations, but let me make this a bigger thing too, because let me tell you what bothers me then. So I'll have people come to me and say, well, these cops need to do this, and they're believers. And you're talking about that. But then they're living with their girlfriend. And I'm like, really?
My girlfriend stays outside of my house.
But you understand what I'm saying? It's always so easy for us to tell somebody, and I think all of us need to be living into our faith and following Jesus better.
Yeah.
But it always is an interesting thing to me, these people over here, and it's like, you are as broken and messed up as the rest of us. And so the question I always say when somebody comes to me who's not a cop and asks that is, how are you living into your faith? How does your wife view you? How do your kids view you? How do the people at your work view you? Because I'm going to talk to this cop, right? Ultimately, and ultimately they're going to do business with God. But ultimately, the only person you're going to answer for is you. So I am willing to talk with cops. I do think I have a personal responsibility to speak into politicians and cops. But I always have to say this when somebody says, what about these people? What about all of us? The fact that the world, that people who are not saved are the ones running this whole Black Lives Matter things is a problem, because the people in the church aren't following Jesus the way they should. Yeah. It's a problem, period, that people outside the church are doing a better job with this than inside the church. And it's because not just cops, but all of us pick and choose when we will follow Jesus instead of following him with the totality of our life.
That's good. That's good. I respectfully disagree, because as an actuary, as a firefighter, as everything else, you don't have the potential to take somebody else's life. And while you're right, we all need to be living that out. I think there's a greater weight, just like it is for you and I as pastors. Like for some reason, living out the gospel and teaching other people the gospel has a greater weight on our shoulders than the lay person who's in their seat. I think the same thing for cops, man. Sorry, the standard by which we hold you to is higher than everyone else in our nation, and it's because you're the only person that we say he should be able to have a gun, and he should be able to, she should be able to take someone else's life. So because you now have that authority, with that authority comes greater responsibility, and I just think that there's a challenge to them specifically, that even if somebody else sleeping with their girlfriend, that doesn't cost me my life. That person has a unique challenge. But to your point, Josh, that doesn't mean they then, because they are a believer, will be perfect.
Well, my issue is not that we shouldn't hold them to a higher standard, nor I. My issue is that that in general, we tend to want to judge people by a standard we don't want to live up to. Granted, I'm not carrying a gun. Granted, I'm not taking people's lives. What I am saying is, as a pastor, I hear this all the time where we say, what about them? I absolutely think conversations have to be had, and there are higher standards. I'm not arguing that. We're not disagreeing on that at all, Leon. What I am literally saying, though, is it's always easy for us to point our fingers, and we do it all the time, inside the church and outside the church. And that I always I'll be honest with you, I always take somewhat of offense when somebody asks a question like that, because it's like, okay, yes, I should have a higher standard as a pastor, they should, but what about, it's easy to talk about everybody else's business and not your own. So I'm always a big proponent too. If we're going to talk about these police's business, and we should, what about my business as a pastor? And that's partly what Paul's saying. He said, he's partly saying you are held to a higher standard as a pastor. They're held to a higher standard as a cop. Yes, I'm dealing with that. But in the same breath, we all follow Jesus too.
Amen.
So are you living out the standard that Jesus has for you as a dad, or if you're a business owner? Because I will never allow somebody just to point the finger at somebody else. In this instance, though, we are literally talking about people in power.
Yeah.
I think that's great points by both of you guys, and I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing that. So 2 things. Number 1, I don't have a girlfriend that's living outside of the house. I was joking when I said that. I've been faithful for my full marriage to my wife, and still.
I knew you were going to get the Facebook post on that.
I'll still get the hate. I'll still get the hate for joking inappropriately, but again, I'm not a man of the cloth either. So, Randy, we got to go. We got to wrap this up, gentlemen. It's been awesome, but Randy, I want to give you the last word on this, and then we'll call it an evening.
Well, I want to stick a finger back in your eye by saying, I love the fact that Leon and Joshua are both. They have a clear-sighted view that the church is not perfect, and they're hanging in there and they're sticking with it, and because they have hope that people can change, and that's what I want to leave on. I don't know the answer to any of this, but I really believe that people can change, and I think we're living in a time now where there's a ferment that is ripe for change. I think, honestly, Josh, that it's going to be a fad for some people, but there's going to be a lot of also changed lives. And that's why I stay in the church. I'm reading a book about how the church has been complicit with racism for the past 400 years. And it's very hard to read and stay in the church. And yet I have hope that the church is changing us and we are changing it. And so that's what I wanted to finish on.
That's good.
All right.
Cool. Paul,
well, Randy,
add something?
Yeah, please.
No, we got to let Paul. Randy, I know you might have to leave, my brother. But I think, so let me just say, as a Black man, for those people that might be listening and not seeing me, I'm in a multicultural church. And I just think the biggest witness to people who don't love God, don't believe in God, is when you see folks from different racial backgrounds, ethnicities, like economic statuses, doing life together as one. And it looks different than the way a lot of our world works. I mean, I think the thing I could probably correlate closest to it is hip hop, of how like, whoa, people from all these different worlds somehow coming together. I think that the church has a beautiful opportunity in this moment to say, yes, let us show the world what unity, through some tough conversations, through some challenging times, and through some crying together, can demonstrate true love. And we believe that Jesus came in love to impact the entire world, and then he blesses us to be able to display that. I believe the church has the greatest opportunity to display that because we have the Lord with us that's already made us one. Now we just need to get over ourselves and walk out this unity. Love you, Randy.
All right. See you, man, Randy. Real quick, I'm going to end on this comment. So I'll take the poke in the eye. But you know, and again, you aren't the first one. I've got calluses on my eyes, and they're not cataracts either. So I've not given up on the church body, meaning my brothers who I'm fellowshipping with tonight. That's not what I've ever given up on. What I have given up on is this current business model, if you will. And I know, go ahead, Josh, kill me on saying that, because I'm poking in the eye with that statement too. On this current business model because it represents nothing like the blueprint we have in the Church of Acts. And you can talk to me all about how, you know, we things have changed. We're not in the same type of environment as we were then. I don't believe that at all. You know, they didn't hire, you know, high-paid consultants or have a marketing plan to get butts in the seats. Start living it out. Change your business model up. Otherwise, you're going to get left behind is where I'm at. And something's got to change, right? And so I've not given up on you guys, my other, you know, brothers and sisters in Christ. That's not what I've given up on. I have given up on this current church model. It's got to change. And I'm, you know, the closest I've come to getting re-engaged is having read this book called Underground Church. It's got to look a lot more like that than what is currently going on. So
for a lot of the people that's going to give you flack and stuff and may not know your journey, I'll just say, like, you know, when I looked out, when I was installed as a pastor at my church, like, you and your entire family were present, you know, so it's not while I know you've got issues and working through things, I don't want people to get that you're like throwing stones at the church and like would never step foot in a place, because I personally have seen the support that you've given me for years and have been grateful for it. And folks could take your statements and try to run with them, but I'd encourage you to take some time to ask him directly and hear it directly from him, not put words in his mouth.
People are still trying to save me, so you guys keep praying for me too. So
someday.
He's got a brother right there that's on it.
Okay, guys, love you. Appreciate the good words, and Leon, thank you for the kind words too, and coming to my defense. I appreciate that you understand and with me in this journey. So, gentlemen, that's a wrap.